In the frontier territory of Coel, a severe drought gripped the land. The wells across the region had dried up, leaving people desperately searching for water but finding none. The cause of the drought was unknown, but the nobles of the country chose to ignore the plight of the poor. The wealthy thrived unaffected, while the poor suffered immensely. The once fertile fields were cracked, plants refused to grow, and animals succumbed to hunger and thirst. Fear-stricken, the people began fleeing the land, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. Margrave Castle, the lord of the territory, viewed these attempts to emigrate as an insult to his authority. "This is a serious offense," he declared. In response, he dispatched soldiers to hunt down the fleeing civilians, punishing them with brutal executions. The soldiers, showing no mercy, slaughtered even young children. The person leading these raids was the Margrave's son, Coel, a powerful magician rumored to carry the blood of divine kings in his veins. Coel stood before the destitute civilians with disdain. "Even beasts know their place," he sneered. "They owe their survival to the grace of those with divine blood. Yet they dare flee simply because it hasn't rained? Such impudence." One woman, tears streaming down her face, knelt and begged that he should please spare their children. She deeply apologized for their actions. Before she could finish, a soldier silenced her with a stab to her chest. She collapsed with a sigh, clutching at her child. Coel turned to the soldier with a frown. "How thoughtless. You're no fun at all. Why kill her so quickly? Torture her first." The soldier apologized for his mistake and asked what can they do to entertain the young master further. With a cruel grin, Coel ordered, "Hang the rest of the villagers one by one." The soldiers obeyed, stringing up the remaining men and boys. As the villagers were hoisted into the air, their families clung to them, trying in vain to ease the pain. Coel watched with a twisted sense of pleasure. "Yes, this is how it should be," he said. "The parents supporting their children, the wives supporting their husbands, what a magnificent sight." Amid the carnage, a soldier approached Coel and informed him of an injured man who had been stabbed. Should he be hanged by the neck or tie the rope around his waist? If they hang him normally, he might die too quickly to entertain them. The man's fiancée, overcome with grief, cried out, "No, don't do this to him. He's already suffering." The soldier struck her across the face, silencing her, telling her to get lost. As the injured man was hoisted, he called out to his fiancée, who tried desperately to support his weight, sobbing as she held him up. Coel laughed at the scene. Truly magnificent. A peasant girl supporting her lover in his final moments. "Support him well or he'll die too quickly," he mocked. Coel approached her and whispered in her ear, "Without you, his veins will burst and he'll die. Keep holding him up or it will all be over." As he relished the suffering, a calm voice interrupted him, saying, "Young Master Coel, perhaps you should amuse yourself with someone your equal." Coel turned to see Sir Zebec, his sword instructor and a holy knight of the king's church. Zebec's stern gaze pierced through the chaos as he asked, "Is there truly a need to go this far? A noble who carries the blood of divine kings should at least maintain dignity." Coel smirked. "Dignity? His dignity remains intact as long as no one dares speak of what happens here. These peasants dared to flee, all because it hasn't rained. This is their punishment." He asked Sir Zebec if he will spread word of this. Will he, a holy knight acknowledged by the king's church, dare to sully the name of one who bears divine blood? After a short pause, Zebec replied that the truth cannot be hidden forever. One of Coel's soldiers leaned in and whispered, asking if they should deal with Sir Zebec. Coel waved him off dismissively. "Forget it," he said. "Just give me a whip." The soldier complied, handing him a whip. With a loud crack, Coel struck the lady. Again and again the whip landed, leaving her screaming in pain as blood streamed from her body. She clung desperately to her fiancé, tears streaking her face. Sir Zebec's anger burned, but he was powerless to act since Coel was his lord, the son of the Margrave, and no action could be taken against him. With an evil grin, Coel observed the lady's suffering, and he was like, "Truly, it is a sight to behold." Watching her writhe in pain, he turned to Zebec, his expression mocking. "Smile, Sir Bezek. They should enjoy the moment. Look at this scene. The lowly commoners suffer, as they should." When the torment ended, Coel and his men left, leaving behind the bodies of the commoners hanging from the gallows. Some wives, unable to bear the weight of their husbands' deaths, fainted. A few succumbed to grief entirely. Yet amidst the horror, the lady, Sophia, clung to life despite her injuries. They can't even take down the bodies of their beloved, because Coel would see it as a crime. Her fiancé, Ifan, stirred weakly and called out her name. He said he was wrong, that help will come. He begged her to please run. She should leave him behind. Sophia refused, holding on to him tightly. "No, Ifan," she whispered. "She'll stay by his side." With trembling hands, she pulled a coin from her pocket and asked, Will the Emperor's herald come? Tears welled in her eyes. Will they save us? On the ground she drew a symbol, a summoning sigil of the Herald clan, one of the most powerful factions in the world. But doubt gnawed at her. Would they come? Her strength waned as she closed her eyes, barely conscious. By the time night gave way to dawn, Sophia lay weakly on the ground. Someone gave her water, and she coughed violently as she swallowed the water. Then she opened her eyes to see Sir Zebec kneeling beside her. Sophia was shocked upon seeing him. She was like, isn't he part of Lord Coel's army? Zebec avoided the question and instead asked if she can eat. He then fed her carefully with a spoon. When morning broke, Sophia was still asleep. Sir Zebec looked at the sky with a grave expression. He quickly woke her up and said, "He came here without anyone knowing. He must leave now, or he'll be punished if Lord Coel learns of this." He put on his coat and prepared to leave. "About your fiancée," he added. "There's no need for her to hold him anymore." He wedged his body with a stick to stop him from falling. Sophia's eyes widened in shock. Ignoring Zebec, she rushed to Ifan and removed the stick. She held him tightly, refusing to let go. Her tears soaked his lifeless face. Zebec turned back, confused by her actions. Why hold on to him? She replied that she won't let her husband die so miserably. Looking at Zebec with desperation, she pleaded, "Please, tell me your name. When the Herald clan comes, she'll ask them to spare him." Zebec was like, "The Herald clan? Does she mean the Slayers of Sanctity? Those soulless heretics?" He studied her silence, realizing it was a confirmation. Zebec said firmly that he don't even know if the Herald clan truly exists. But even if they come, Coel commands 20 well-armed soldiers. Zebec is also bound by his duty as a knight. And Coel, he's not just any man. He is a mage of high standing, bearing the divine blood of the Jaegers. Zebec asked her if she was aware of how extraordinary the divine blood was, the blood of the Jaegers. The lady responded that even if Coel was a magician and possessed divine blood, the Herald clan was capable of killing him because they too were magicians. She explained that the reason they were called the Slayers of Sanctity was because they had earned that name after slaying kings who bore divine blood. With a sigh, Sir Zebec muttered that she was not in her right mind. Then again, who would be, after enduring such an ordeal? He told her, he's Bezek, a holy knight of the king's church, but he's not telling her his name to beg the Slayers of Sanctity for his life. He's telling her so that, if they come, he will fight them with everything he's got. With those words, he turned and began walking away, adding that he would return at night. As Sir Zebec left, the lady whispered to herself, 2 days. All she need to do is hold out for 2 days. Her hope rested on the Herald clan arriving within those 2 days. She gazed at the symbol she had drawn on the ground, clinging to the sliver of hope it offered. Some years ago, before the calamity descended upon the land, when the leaves were still green, the community was flourishing, and the air was untainted by despair, Sophia had a conversation with Ifan. Ifan held a coin etched with strange symbols and handed it to her. "What is this?" she asked, intrigued. Ifan responded, "Have you heard of the Herald clan?" "No," she replied, shaking her head. He explained that the Herald clan was spoken of in a story his father had told him as a child. They were known as the Slayers of Sanctity and were rumored to be soulless. Holding up the coin, he said, "This is the Emperor's gold. It's said to summon the soulless to one's aid, but she must be careful with this. If the heretical interrogators of the king's church find her with it, they will execute her." Before Sophia could respond, Ifan gave her a kiss on the cheek. Blushing, she playfully hit him and exclaimed, "Oh my God, why did he do that all of a sudden?" Laughing, she then asked, "Wait, why is he giving her something so dangerous as a gift?" Ifan replied, "Just in case. If something happens to them, she can use this." It's said that if the holder draws a triangle on the ground and places the gold coin in the center, a herald will come to their aid. But he hoped they never have to rely on this. Now, in the present, Sophia stared at the triangle she had drawn on the ground. The coin sat in its center, a symbol of her desperate hope. Only 1 day remained for the herald to come to her aid. Weak from hunger and thirst, she clung to the thought that if she could endure 1 more day, salvation might come. Meanwhile, back at the noble land, the nobleman wasted water like it's nothing, not minding the fact that there was a drought in the nearby land. Sir Zebec stood under the scorching sun, gazing at the sky. The heat was unusually intense. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, sir," said Coel, approaching him with a sly smile. "Isn't this fun? He should smile more." Zebec turned to him, his expression grim. "If he keeps killing the citizens, there will be no one left to pay taxes. He should at least limit the deaths." Coel laughed lightly. "The wanderers who are dissatisfied are on the move. Theft is increasing." Sir Zebec clenched his fists in frustration. "In the Margrave's territory, there is rich soil. They could evacuate the poor there." Coel scoffed. If they let the poor onto the rich soil, they'll ruin the agriculture and run away. Agriculture depends on the soil, the climate, the sky, and the king's light. Zebec remained silent. Coel stepped closer and added coldly, the poor face drought because they were unfaithful to the king's church. Isn't that what the doctrine says? Coel smiled darkly. Everything he do is to save the people. If someone made the soil rich and another caused the drought, then the sinners should be punished. Those who contributed to making the land fruitful deserve to live on it. He challenged Zebec, stating that if Zebec wanted to defy his orders and rescue them, he should try his best and see the outcome. Zebec stood frozen in silence, unable to respond. The land of the poor lay in ruins, a barren wasteland where survival seemed impossible. Though the world was dry and its people suffered, they clung to the faint hope of water. Zebec, witnessing their plight, clenched his fists in frustration. Yet, he was powerless to change their fate. Now, he was returning to the spot where Sophia cradled her dying fiancé. As he approached, he noticed Sophia's labored breaths growing fainter. Before she passed, she murmured to herself, lamenting that she couldn't hold on for 2 days, as Sir Zebec had told her. Her voice carried despair as she concluded that it was useless, even if the heralds appeared now. Suddenly, Zebec stood alert, sensing a strange atmosphere. Something was approaching. Before he could act, a man appeared, a figure with arrows embedded in his back and a sword drawn. The man pointed his blade at Zebec's neck and warned him not to move or turn around. Zebec, watching this unfold, muttered to himself, wondering who this stranger was to brandish a sword so fearlessly in such a desolate place. He observed the man's ghost-like movements, realizing he hadn't noticed his presence at all. Breaking the silence, Zebec asked, "Are you a herald?" The masked man nodded and confirmed, "Yes, he's a herald." The masked man then asked if he's a knight or a rescuer. He replied saying, "He is Zebec, a knight of the king's church." The masked man let out a dry laugh. "Just asking out of curiosity," he said, "but isn't Zebec a contractor? If a holy knight of the king's church is petitioning a contract, that would be quite the sight." Zebec, angered by the remark, demanded, "Are you truly a herald, or are you just mocking me?" The masked man chuckled. "If he's not the contractor, then it must be that dead girl over there." He gestured to Sophia's lifeless body. Since she's already dead, he supposed he've earned a free gold coin. He turned back to Zebec. "Care to tell me what's going on here?" Zebec, maintaining his composure, offered a deal. If he put his sword away and keep his distance, he promised to tell the masked guy everything. He swore on his honor. In an instant, the masked man sprinted backward, covering an incredible distance within seconds. Zebec stared in disbelief. What the hell? How did he move that far so quickly? Is he some kind of phantom? The masked man sheathed his sword and smirked. "You seem confident, Zebec. Perhaps you wouldn't be so calm if I were truly a phantom." From afar, Zebec called out, asking if he's a mage. The man replied, "Everyone in the Herald clan is a mage except him. He can't use magic." Zebec frowned. "Then how did he manage that move just now? Wasn't that magic?" The man shrugged. "It's hard to distinguish superhuman physical abilities from magic, isn't it?" Zebec muttered to himself, confused by the stranger's cryptic words. Finally, he demanded, "What is your name and rank as a herald?" After a pause, the man introduced himself with a slight bow. "He is Azadin of the 108 Spirits, an emperor's herald." Zebec was stunned. The 108 Spirits? That's the lowest rank in the Herald clan, but with the skill he just displayed, he's far from ordinary. Azadin smiled. Now, as he promised, Zebec should tell him what happened here. Zebec explained the events in detail as they walked through the ruined town. Azadin listened intently, occasionally nodding. After some time, a voice echoed from the sky. "The contract has been established." Zebec looked up, startled. He searched for the source of the voice and spotted an owl descending from above. The owl landed on Azadin's shoulder and spoke. "Azadin, you responded to the request, but the requester is dead. It seems you've earned some free gold coins." Zebec, staring at the owl, exclaimed in disbelief, "What the hell? How is there a talking owl?" Turning to Azadin, the owl said firmly, "He should start moving now to complete the next mission. Don't rest. Start immediately." Our MC, Azadin, known as the bearer of 108 spirits, narrowed his eyes at the remark. His pride flared as he thought, this damn title. Must the owl disgrace him by addressing him as such? Despite his irritation, Azadin prepared to leave. Just as he was about to step away, Zebec called out, "Wait!" He turned to Azadin, his tone sharp. "So, because the requester is dead, you'll just take the gold coin and leave? Just like that?" Azadin raised an eyebrow. "Strange, isn't it?" he replied. "Why would Zebec want the request fulfilled? If he do, It's Master Coel who will suffer. Zebec's hand moved to his sword. That won't happen, he declared. I'll defeat you before you even reach Coel. Azzedine smirked. To think he'd draw a sword that remains silent in the face of injustice. Isn't that pitiful? Sir Zebec gritted his teeth, his frustration evident. Azzedine's expression turned serious. Are you angry at me, Zebec? Or at yourself, for turning a blind eye to the injustices Coel inflicted upon the commoners? Zebec roared back. What do you know of it? Azzedine ignored the outburst and instead asked calmly, do you know the constellations of the night sky? Their names and the myths tied to them? Sir Zebec paused, confused. Why bring that up now? What is he trying to say? Azzedine continued. Humans may see the same stars, but they interpret them differently. To some, a star might represent the protagonist of a myth. To others, it's just a faint light in the darkness, just like how the sight of the suffering commoners appeared different to Zebec compared to others. But Sir Zebec replied, no. He's no different from the rest of Coel's soldiers, since he stood by as the commoners suffered, and as a knight of the king's church, he revered the bloodline of the divine king without question. Azzedine pressed on. I don't wish to fight you, Zebec. If he felt pity for the girl who was mistreated, then they are not enemies. Their swords should not clash. With that, Azzedine approached the lifeless couple hanging from the tree. He cut them down, carrying both bodies on his shoulders. Do you have a shovel? He asked. Sir Zebec frowned. What does he mean? To bury them, Azzedine replied simply. Sir Zebec hesitated, then said, if he bury them, it's practically a challenge to Coel. He knows this. Azzedine's voice was calm but resolute. If you don't have a shovel, I'll make do. Without waiting, he knelt and began digging the ground with his bare hands. Sir Zebec watched in silence. Anyone would think he wanted to stab Azzedine, but instead, he struck his sword into the ground. Then he began digging alongside Azzedine. Together, they dug until the grave was deep enough. They buried the couple, marking the spot with a wooden cross. Azzedine stood over the graves and recited a prayer. Oh, Archangel of Wisdom, courage and mercy, have mercy on their souls. Sir Zebec stared in disbelief. A man of the Herald clan using the prayer of the rescuer's order? Azzedine smiled faintly. He admired their ideology, he said. Zebec shook his head. Reckless. Brazen. You've abandoned the destiny of your clan to embrace heresy. Azzedine's gaze hardened. What good is destiny if it doesn't align with what's right? Sir Zebec pressed him further, asking, what does he even like about the rescuer's order? Azzedine didn't answer. Instead, he removed his bow and turned his attention to the distance. What are you doing now? Zebec demanded. Azzedine's eyes remained fixed ahead and said that someone Zebec revere is approaching. Sir Zebec spun around, his heart sinking as he recognized the figure. It was Coel. With an evil smile, Coel taunted, come on now, Zebec should have told him that he likes the commoner girl. He got to admit, she's hella fine for a commoner living in the countryside. Zebec knew he was in a hot seat, and there was no way out. He told himself that Coel must have figured out that he had taken care of the girl whom Coel had punished. And with about 20 heavily armed soldiers around him, even Zebec knew he stood no chance against them. Noticing the person standing beside Zebec, Coel asked, by the way, who the hell is that bastard? But Azzedine, our MC, was already drawing his bow, preparing to fire. With a snap, he released an arrow. In the blink of an eye, it flew toward one of the soldiers. The speed of the shot was blinding, and the arrow pierced the soldier's eye, causing him to fall to the ground dead. The rest of the soldiers were shocked. From that distance, Azzedine had pierced one of them, and they hadn't even noticed. Zebec, observing the scene, thought to himself, who the hell is this Azzedine? He had managed to land the shot on the soldier with such precision, despite standing at the far end of the battlefield. The accuracy was astounding, but Azzedine didn't stop. He kept firing, sending another arrow hurtling toward the soldiers. They raised their shields to defend themselves, but to their surprise, the arrow curved mid-air like a snake and pierced one soldier's chest, shattering his armor. The soldier began vomiting foam, signaling that the arrow wasn't just deadly, it was poisoned. The soldier collapsed to the ground. The rest of the soldiers, stunned and confused, whispered to each other, is the arrow piercing through the shields? Sir Zebec, equally baffled, exclaimed, how the hell is that possible? The arrow even curved like a living snake. Azzedine, noticing Zebec's shock, addressed him directly. About your question earlier, he said, didn't Zebec ask him what he liked about the rescuer's orders? Zebec nodded. Azzedine continued, he liked the idea that a person's worth is determined not by their birth, but by their beliefs and actions, just like how someone born with the blood of a divine king who rapes and massacres his people cannot be considered noble. Hearing this, Coel's face twisted in anger. He realized Azzedine was referring to him. Gripping his teeth, Coel snarled, "You son of a bitch, I'll kill you right now." But Azzedine calmly stretched his bow and aimed not at Coel but at the rest of the soldiers. Coel yelled at Sir Zebec, ordering him to kill Azzedine immediately, but before anyone could act, Azzedine flew up into the sky, heading toward the moon. As he soared, he launched several arrows at the soldiers. The soldiers, caught off guard, couldn't dodge. They could only watch in horror as the arrows struck them, one by one, each landing with deadly accuracy. Azzedine landed swiftly, and the soldiers, now desperate, shouted in unison, "Kill him!" They charged, thrusting their spears toward him, but Azzedine used one of their spears as a platform, stepping on it and launching himself back into the air. From above, he fired more arrows, each one landing with precision, piercing the soldiers, especially in their eyes, rendering them unable to fight. One arrow, aimed deliberately at Coel, struck his ear. Coel blinked in pain as he noticed blood seeping from the wound. He realized that Azzedine wasn't trying to kill him. Instead, Azzedine's goal was to disable the soldiers, rendering them useless. Frustrated, Coel yelled, calling Azzedine a bastard, demanding, "Who the hell is he?" Our MC landed behind Coel and answered coldly, "My name is Azzedine, and I am a Herald." At the mention of the Herald clan, Coel's face drained of color. He was in deep trouble. The soldiers around them, hearing Azzedine's words, were equally stunned. What the hell? He's a Herald? So, he's soulless. Our MC was about to fire another arrow when he realized his quiver was empty. He had no arrows left. Panicking, Coel shouted to the soldiers, informing them that Azzedine had nothing left to fight with. And then, bang! Azzedine delivered a punch that could alter a man's destiny. It seemed Coel had forgotten that our MC had his fists as well. The blow sent Coel flying backward. Azzedine stood on his horse, watching as Coel screamed in pain, clutching his eye. Suddenly, one of the soldiers charged at him, ready to attack, but Azzedine dodged with ease, delivering a blow that would leave the soldier unable to feel like a man again. He grabbed one of their swords, holding it up and declaring that he had reduced their numbers with his arrows. If they were brave enough, they could come at him. Before they could react, Azzedine paused, as if remembering something. With a swift motion, he drove the sword into Coel's genitals. The soldiers stared in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. They whispered among themselves, questioning Azzedine's obsession with castration. Was he insane? But Azzedine did that as punishment, because Coel is notorious for raping women. Few minutes later, our MC has defeated all the soldiers, rendering them unable to even move. Then he walked toward Coel, who was desperately trying to crawl away, using what little strength he had left. Azzedine spoke coldly, telling Coel that trash like him, those who inflicted pain on innocent people, were meant to die. Suddenly, Coel unleashed his light magic, which blazed as brightly as the sun, illuminating the area and blinding everyone in its path. The soldiers cried out, warning their young master that they would go blind at this rate. The light was unbearable, but Azzedine remained unmoved, having prepared for this since he wore a mask. With a smug grin, Coel declared that this was his power, a proof that his noble bloodline was incomparable to anyone else. But before Coel could continue yapping, Azzedine struck. With a swift motion, he sliced at Coel's shoulder, causing the guy to gasp in pain. Coel was surprised that he didn't die, even though he had been cut. But soon enough, the true pain hit him. His genitals had been destroyed. Only now did he realize the extent of his injury. In agony, Coel demanded to know what Azzedine had done to him. Azzedine smirked and asked if Coel was mentally challenged, pointing out that it should have been obvious what had happened to him. As he writhed in pain, our MC raised his sword, ready to deliver a finishing blow. But Coel, desperate, begged for his life, asking what Azzedine wanted. Money? Women? Swords? He would give anything, claiming he was a descendant of the sacred Jaeger's holy family. Azzedine, uninterested, responded coldly that Coel's status meant nothing to him. He was a slayer of sanctity, a herald. Just as Azzedine prepared to strike the final blow, Sir Zebec approached. Coel called out to him, demanding help, but Zebec lied, claiming that he couldn't see due to the light from Coel's magic. Coel, enraged, cursed Zebec, accusing him of betraying him. He yelled that he's a noble, from a sacred bloodline, and wondered if Azzedine was treating him this way just because he had mistreated commoners. Azzedine, unfazed by Coel's words, reflected for a moment. If he let Coel go now, the man would still live, albeit with a sense of pride. Azzedine didn't see any reason for mercy, though, and with a swift motion, he extended his sword toward Coel's eyes. With a flick, he destroyed his sight completely. Coel screamed in agony, collapsing to the ground, now fully blind. Although Azzedine didn't have a contractor, but he believed he had been considerate by meeting the demands of the dead lady. Now the emperor's law had been fulfilled. But suddenly, Sir Zebec unsheathed his sword and declared that he was a knight of the Church of the King. He could not simply let Azzedine, who spoke of the emperor's law, go unchallenged. Regardless of his righteous deeds, Sir Zebec would fight him, at the very least to honor his pride as a knight. But our MC sighed and said, "Zebec is not like the other knights of the Church of the King." Sir Zebec yelled, demanding to know if Azzedine was trying to insult him. Azzedine calmly replied that it was, in fact, a praise. He went on to say that the other knights of the Church of the King were nothing more than scoundrels, forcefully exiled from their homes due to inheritance matters. Sir Zebec paused, realizing that Azzedine spoke the truth. He calmed down, the tension fading. Our MC then asked if Sir Zebec would be able to keep up with him or follow his speed. With that, Azzedine sprinted away, leaving Zebec momentarily stunned. As Azzedine disappeared into the distance, Sir Zebec found himself reflecting on his words. Azzedine had said that the knights of the Church of the King were scoundrels, and it was true. This applied to Sir Zebec as well. With a smile, Zebec felt a weight lift off his chest. Elsewhere, in a town filled with the rich and noble, the commoners bowed before their lord, pleading for exemption from taxes. One beggar spoke up, begging for mercy. He explained that people were fleeing, becoming nomads, and those who had starved to death were wandering the streets as undead. Thieves and monsters overran the area, and they simply couldn't afford to pay taxes. After a moment, Margrave Coel, the lord, sneered at their plight. "How shameless," he scoffed. "At this rate, they'll soon be begging for rations too." The beggar looked at him in shock, begging for mercy. "Please, forgive us," he implored. "We are at our wits' end." But Margrave Coel's response was cold. "Nothing will change the lowly blood that flows through them. But if they wish, he will offer relief, but on one condition." The beggars waited anxiously as Margrave's evil smile grew. "Although, if they fail to comply with his request, they will all be hanged." The elderly commoners exchanged fearful glances. Though they would benefit from the rations, the condition was a deadly one. They didn't know whether to accept or reject. Then, his voice interrupted their hesitation. "Fear not," said Lord Margrave. "The task he asked of them is simple. They must find a single page of a specific grimoire." The commoners were shocked. "A grimoire? They know nothing of magic. How could they find something like that?" Lord Margrave reassured them. "Even ignorant fools like them will be able to find it, if they only wish for it. The page will respond to their call and reveal itself." He then made a promise. If they bring him this grimoire, he will exempt their village from taxes for 3 years and provide 50 bushels each of wheat, barley, and oats. The commoners gasped in disbelief. "Is that really true?" one asked. Another spoke up, asking, "Shouldn't they at least know the name of the grimoire so they may search for it?" After a pause, Margrave replied, "The page they shall seek is a copy of the Book of the Divine King." The commoners recoiled in shock. The Book of the Divine King was one of the most powerful and legendary books in the world. The commoners were dismissed shortly after, and the lord sat back in contemplation. Suddenly a snake slithered into the room, standing tall before him. Lord Margrave stared at it but made no move. Then, without warning, the snake turned out to be a busty witch, a very pretty, good-looking one. Her beauty was as poisonous as it was captivating. She told Lord Margrave that mentioning the name of the Book of the Divine King was rather careless, but Margrave dismissed it, saying it was nonsense. After all, weren't they all already searching for the grimoire across the continent? Rumors would spread no matter what. It would be wiser, he said, to find even a single page before that happened. He asked the witch what she came for. She replied that she was obliged to inform him that his son had fallen victim in the eastern part of the continent. Margrave scoffed. His son, Coel, and the forces under his command wouldn't fall so easily. Sir Zebec was with him after all, but the witch informed him that their opponent was the Herald clan. Margrave raised an eyebrow. "The Herald clan? Well," he said, "he's sure the Herald clan is after the Book of the Divine King too. If they wish to be freed from the curse of their duty, they'll need it." But is his son really dead? The witch told him that she had heard Coel had lost his sight, and that his reproductive organs had been damaged. She asked the Lord what he intended to do now. He ordered her to send soldiers to deal with the Herald clan. Then, stretching out his arm, he added that she should command someone else to do it. If Coel had been castrated, he could simply make another son. In the next scene, our MC was still on a journey to complete his mission. He checked his bottle, but only a drop of water left. "This is bad. He'll die of thirst at this rate." He snapped at the owl, asking why it had to put on a show, saying it would take only 2 days. "You foolish spirits," he muttered again. The owl cautioned not to speak impertinently to the emperor's mouth. But our MC was unbothered. He shook his head in disbelief. The Emperor had died without any plans. The heralds once loyal to the Emperor were now despised by the people, labeled as the slayers of sanctity and soulless heretics. The owl rushed our MC on this mission, which had made Azzedine abandon his luggage and run as fast as he could. Now, he was so thirsty he could die, with only dried food to sustain him. He didn't think he'd be able to digest it, and soon he would starve to death. The owl apologized, but there was little to be done. Suddenly, Azzedine felt a change in atmosphere. He quickly held his sword ready to fight, but then he noticed it was some ghost. After their figure became clear, some of the familiar faces he saw were the very ones he'd buried. The two couples whom he had laid to rest bowed to him. Azzedine greeted them. He told the spirits that this land held neither the light of the king's virtue nor the blessing of the archangels. It wasn't good for them to linger here. He had repaid their grudges and told them to move on to the afterlife. But the spirits couldn't speak. Instead, the lady pointed towards a direction. Azzedine followed her finger to a well. He began walking toward it, wondering if they meant to offer him water. He told them they didn't need to do that. They could have simply rested in peace. Azzedine didn't need water right now. He could die from thirst with glee. But nonetheless, he approached the well and looked inside. As he pulled the lever to draw the water, he couldn't believe what he saw. There, inside the well, was a piece of paper, symbols written on it. And to his astonishment, it turned out to be one of the pages of the Divine Book of Kings.